Timo Meier and Jesper Bratt and their contract negotiations. Yes, we're talking about it once again because information is coming left and right, and we got a few updates. We have a lot to talk about in today's episode, Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliot scores! Oh, Steven stepped up, nailed him. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. My apologies for not posting an episode yesterday. It was a travel day for me. As you can see, I'm not in my normal studio. I'm back in Arizona for the time being. So just wanted to give you guys that bit of information. But let's get on with today's episode because we have a lot of new information in regard to Timo Meier and Jesper Bratt and their contract negotiations. I know, shocker, because at this point, it seems like old news because it always feels like we're just talking about their contract negotiations. Are they going to re-sign? Are they going to walk? Are the Devils going to trade their rights away? But every day, left and right, I'm being given new information. And originally, I was going to make it only a one segment type of talking point in a different episode. But like I said, given the amount of information that I've been getting the last few days, I was just like, you know what? This deserves to be a full-length episode. So in segment one, we're going to talk about Timo Meier and his contract negotiation update. Then in the second segment, we'll talk about Jesper Bratt. And also, Pierre LeBrun put out a theory as to why Bratt and his agency kind of hinder the process of signing the dotted line to get Bratt locked up here for a lengthy extension. So once again, we'll talk about that in the second segment. And then in the third and final segment, we're going to look at some other contract situations for the Devils because obviously Timo and Jesper, they deserve their payday, but given the amount of players that are also set to become either unrestricted or restricted free agents, the Devils have to be very conservative about their finance because one of the reasons why the Devils were able to have such a historical season was because the amount of depth that was on their roster. So let's first begin with Timo Meier, and here's what we got in regard to his contract talks. So as reported by NHL.com, they recently put out an article stating that the Devils are to begin contract talks with Meier this week. Now, what's the situation on the matter? Like, what's the background information? Well, as we all know, he's set to become a restricted free agent on July 1st and is 1 year away from unrestricted free agency. And obviously, that is a scenario that the New Jersey Devils would like to avoid because you don't want to have essentially given up a lot of assets to get Timo Meier on your roster and him essentially be a rental player. So once again, according to NHL.com, they put out an article and they were able to speak with Tom Fitzgerald. And here's what he had to say in regard to Meier's production. He said, "It's really hard to come in and understand a new system. As a player, I've done it twice. It's really hard. Our system's hard too. The defensive zone is difficult to understand, and it takes some time. Coaches say it takes at least 20 games to get used to a system, so you evaluate your team after 20 games, right? And sure, it took some adjustment." Now, they also stated that Meier, during the playoffs, he put up 4 points, 2 goals, 2 assists, and Fitzgerald said it was understandable as to why Meier put up that kind of production. But something I've always been saying like the past month or so is that I am personally not disappointed with Meier's playoff production because I think he did a lot of other things to try to contribute to the Devils being a grittier and tougher team. And we saw that especially in the first series against the New York Rangers. But I've already touched on that and have given you guys my thoughts on the matter. Now, I'm sure a lot of people understand the background information as to why the Devils might want Timo Meier to re-sign long-term with the organization. But NHL Network actually had a bit of a discussion on the matter, and they put out some projections as to how much money Timo Meier could make if he does re-sign long-term with the Devils. Now, once again, according to NHL Network, they are reporting that Meier's agency might demand 8 years and $10 million. Oof, that's a pretty hefty price for someone like Timo Meier, because I am one of Meier's big defenders, but at the same time, re-signing him to an 8-year, $10 million contract, that's a bit of a high price that I think I would try to avoid, which is why I've been saying try to re-sign Timo Meier to a team-friendly deal. They also put out that maybe you can re-sign him to 8 years and $8 million, or worst comes to worst, 8 years and $8.5 million, which is in the same ballpark as someone like Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier. But something else you have to consider is that Timo Meier does have a qualifying offer, which means the Devils can elect to just pay him $10 million, own his rights for 1 more year. But remember, that's a bit of a risk. Now, once again, NHL Network was talking about the matter, and they were like, why not just the Devils accept the qualifying offer and just begin the negotiation process throughout the season and see what comes about it? Well, remember what I said moments ago. Meier is 1 year away from unrestricted free agency. So that is a huge risk because he won't be a restricted free agent. Once again, he will be an unrestricted free agent. That is way, way, way too big of a risk because someone like Timo Meier is going to be heavily sought after. He is a very special player. He is capable of scoring. He can contribute on special teams because I project that he is definitely going to help the Devils' power play scenario come next year. He's a big power forward. I'm sure a lot of teams would like to go after someone like Timo Meier. Now, the thing is, if the Devils were in a win-now situation, then maybe you could consider just electing to do the qualifying offer and see how it goes. But the fact of the matter is simply this, and I think Tom Fitzgerald has alluded to it in the past, the Devils are trying to build towards something special. And a lot of their players, they haven't even reached their primes yet. The more important players haven't reached their primes yet, like Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes, hopefully Jesper Bratt, Dougie Hamilton, I still think can contribute for the next few years. Now, if you looked at some of their veteran pieces like Eric Haula or Tomas Tatar or Andre Palat, maybe you could say like, okay, they're a little past their primes, but they could still contribute in more ways than one. But those are just a few players on the Devils roster. Getting someone like Timo Meier for 1 year and then possibly letting him test the waters in free agency, that is a huge risk. And I'm sure the Devils don't want to find themselves just scrambling to just match any offer and just say, hey, Timo, before you sign with that team, we'll up the ante a little bit. We'll do this, we'll do that. So if the Devils were in a win now situation in which like a lot of their players were out of their primes, they're towards the end of their contracts, then maybe you do that qualifying offer similar to what NHL Network was talking about. But why take that sort of risk? And yes, I know Meier wants to get paid. I know his camp is demand or is like asking for like 8 years, $10 million. But at the same time, one of the scenarios I talked about in the past, which is why I wanted the Devils to stay away from this player. Remember when I did a silly season episode in regard to Mitch Marner and the possibility of the Devils trading away Jesper Bratt's rights in some sort of package to obtain him? I said you want to kind of stay away from that, not because Marner is not a good player. Obviously, he's a finalist for the Selke Trophy. But at the end of the day, once he reaches 100 points, once he gets to that threshold, then you know he's going to be demanding for a lot more money. And for Timo Meier, it's just like if you re-sign him 8 years, $10 million, then you can kiss a lot of those depth players goodbye because the Devils need to not only make sure that Meier is happy with his extension, but Jesper Bratt as well. And you need to factor in, and we'll talk about this in the third and final segment, but you got other players that are also set to become RFAs or UFAs, and you need to retain a good chunk of those players so that way the Devils can keep their overall depth. So that's my thing for Timo Meier, which is I'm glad that they're working on a deal throughout these next few days because it's best to get a jump start on this but before July 1st. And obviously we saw what happened last year with Jesper Bratt and just the lingering process of this. But at the same time, make sure that you just try to convince Meier to take that team-friendly deal so that way the Devils can retain a lot of their valuable assets, But at the same time, they still have a lot of those centerpieces that can definitely drive their engine. So there's your update on Timo Meier. Contract negotiations, as we speak, have begun. And that's the scenarios that NHL Network was basically putting out there. Once again, this is all reported. Nothing is confirmed, but they're saying that Timo Meier's agency might demand 8 years, $10 million. Obviously, that's not something I would do. I think that's too big of a risk. And Meier is a very good player. But remember, the star pupil is Jack Hughes. And I think the Devils are pretty headstrong of the fact that they don't want to surpass Jack Hughes' annual deal because Jack Hughes is obviously the franchise player. Now, we're going to move on from one contract negotiation update to the other. Let's talk about Jesper Bratt and what the situation is like for him. Okay, so Pierre LeBrun is reporting that Jesper Bratt might be re-signed to an 8-year extension. Now, the thing is like, okay, how much annually? Because I'm not seeing any reports of that matter. But basically, it's like a max deal. And my concern is that Jesper Bratt will go from underrated to overrated with the snap of the finger. Because at the same time, I know that Jesper Bratt is a good player, but is he seriously better than Jack Hughes? Is he better than Nico Hischier? I know his agency wants to get like the most out of their client, but at the same time, we need Jesper Bratt to be a team player. And this is something we're going to talk about momentarily. But before we do, our friend Ryan Novozinski, who's a beat writer for NJ.com, he was able to speak with Jesper Bratt's agent. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Joakim Persson. So Persson has represented Bratt since he was a teenager, ever since Bratt was like 15 or 16. And he spoke with Novo once again. And here's what he said in regard to how the contract negotiation process is looking like. He said, I don't compare. Each new contract is a new discussion. That's something we had to work through. I can say now we are talking and in communication, me and Tom. Now, here's the situation this year for Jesper Bratt and his agency, which is the Devils have an option. It's been reported that the higher priority for the time being is Timo Meier, because the fact of the matter for Jesper Bratt is that he's a very good player, but Bratt's production is replaceable because if you take away his offensive capabilities, he's not really doing much out there. So if you take away Nico Hischier's offensive capabilities, he's playing defense. You take away Jack Hughes' offensive capabilities, his speed is still a headache and a half to deal with. You take away Erik Halla's scoring abilities, which we already saw early on this year. He's doing the dirty work in order to help someone like Jack Hughes succeed. So for Jesper Bratt, it's like he's a very good player, but I think his offensive capabilities can be replaced because now you got someone like Timo Meier. If Jesper Bratt's not there, Timo Meier will slide into that third option. Or we saw the rise of Dawson Mercer. Maybe, just maybe, I might be stretching this just a bit, so take this with a grain of salt. But if Alexander Holtz is able to repeat what he was able to do in Utica at the NHL level, get a skating coach, wherever the case might be, maybe we could see the rise of Alexander Holtz similar to Dawson Mercer. Not trying to take anything away from Bratt or anything, but at the same time, I'm just saying, like, the offense is not the issue with the Devils. It's the other categories because they have a lot of offensive weapons. But when we talk about some of the struggles that the Devils had this year, I don't think offense is going to be high on that list. So this scenario this year around for Bratt, it's a little different compared to like last year, because last year the Devils, no one was projecting for them to do all that well. They were trying to aim for the stars. They aimed for people like Kevin Fiala, Alex DeBrincat, Johnny Gaudreau, Matthew Tkachuk. And unfortunately, they whiffed on all those players, which is why Andre Palat was able to get a little bit of a pay rise because his agency saw this and was like, look, we know that Andre Palat was your backup option. Cough up the money. Otherwise, you're going to have to go to your plan C, plan D, plan E, whatever the case might be. Now, for Bratt is plan B. He is not plan A. Timo Meier is plan A, in my opinion, and based on what's being reported for the time being. So when Joakim Persson, once again, Jesper Bratt's agent, is saying all that, I think he knows the situation. He knows what the scenario is going to be like for Tom Fitzgerald and the rest of the organization, which is, I would love to have Jesper Bratt back onto this roster. I project he will be in a Devil sweater come next year, but your client this time around is not top priority just because we saw what Timo Meier can do with a very small sample size. Now, Novo also touched this on his article, and I actually heard Pierre LeBrun discuss this in the past as well. What's going on with Jesper Bratt? Why is this taking so long is the question. Well, LeBrun is theorizing that maybe Bratt and his camp are looking for a short-term deal, so that way at the end of his contract with the Devils, hypothetically, Bratt can test the open waters and maybe get a lucrative deal. And keep in mind, the salary cap is projected to go up $1 million this summer, and it's only going to go higher from here on out, according to Commissioner Gary Bettman. So in the previous episode, I talked about Damon Severson and him testing the open waters because he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. And obviously, this free agency class is weaker compared to last year. And someone like Severson, who was able to contribute on a very good team like the Devils, has past experience of being an alternate captain. He's a leader. He's not the youngest, but at the same time, he's not the oldest either. So someone like Severson this offseason is going to get paid. Would I like Severson to return to the Devils organization? Sure. But at the same time, it's just like, why would he want to take a team-friendly deal, come back to the Devils organization when he is going to get a pay rise this offseason? Because I think Severson does want to win. I don't think he has any ill intent towards the Devils organization, but strike while the iron is hot and chase the bag in this case. Get what you're trying to ask for. And I think that's what Bratt is trying to do. He's trying to maybe get a 2 to 3 year deal, test the open market, salary cap will go up, and maybe Jesper Bratt will get that lucrative deal that he wants. So that's the question. Is Jesper Bratt a team player? Because we've been seeing a lot of rumors go around the past year or so saying that Bratt wants to return to the organization. He went on Speak of the Devil podcast about a year ago saying he wants to re-sign. He said it before the season started. He said it halfway through the year. He said it during his exit interviews. Jack Hughes was basically saying, like, you can't say that you want to re-sign with the organization. You got to get it done. Like, actions speak louder than words. So it's Jesper Bratt being a team player in this case. Because if you want to get paid, then go somewhere else. But do you want to get paid or do you want to win? Because at the end of the day, I think Bratt's contract will still be somewhat lucrative because that's why the Devils are not going to retain someone like Damon Severson, so that way they have the money to re-sign both Bratt and Meier to lengthy extensions. So that's what I want them to do, which is basically you got to play ball. You got to be a team player. Take that team-friendly deal. What's holding you back? Because the Devils are trying to build something special, and this more so goes towards Bratt, but you have to be a team player in this case. I don't know what Bratt's going to be demanding. I don't know what his agent's going to be demanding, but something else that concerns me is that it seems like Bratt's agent does most of the negotiating because Bratt stated that during his exit interview, and I think he stated that in the past as well, that Joakim Persson does the negotiating with Tom Fitzgerald. If Bratt really wants to stay, and I don't know what goes on behind closed doors, so I'm just speculating, why don't you step in and basically say, let's get a deal done, similar to what Eric Haula did with Tom Fitzgerald, because reports are coming out saying that Eric Haula and the contract extension talks, they're in the works. Like it's just at like maybe stage 1 or stage 2 at this point, but basically it's in the works. But Haula is taking the initiative to say, like, I want to remain with the Devils organization. Once again, my prediction is that I think Timo Meier and Jesper Bratt will resign with the Devils organization, but how long, we're just going to have to wait and see. And like I said, got all this information courtesy of NHL.com and also my pal Ryan Obazinski. If you want to check out the articles and be the judge for yourselves, the link to both articles will be in the description. Highly recommend subscribing to Novo's account on NJ.com. He puts out a lot of great work. And we're going to talk about some other contract discussions happening with the Devils organization because, once again, Timo Meier and Jesper Bratt, how long and how much they re-sign with the Devils organization, it can really affect a lot of other players, and one player might be the scapegoat in this case. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about FanDuel. So make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs. It sucks that my Lakers aren't in the NBA Finals, but hey, I want to see Jimmy Buckets win a ring and bring a championship back home to the Miami Heat. Because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. There's no better place to bet on all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. And let me tell you guys about Bird Dogs, because I'm back in Arizona. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, it's hot, and Bird Dogs shorts make me look good. So Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg and give you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dogs shorts do the exact same thing in Lululemon, but fit way better. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. Bird Dogs fixed this issue by investing in cloud knit fabric that looks like just khakis, but stretches so you could get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Bird Dogs uses anti-stink, sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all summer long. So go to birddogs.com/lockedonnhl and enter the promo code LockedOnNHL for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedonnhl for a free Yeti-style tumbler. Trust me, after you get them, you will not want to take your Bird Dogs off. I promise you. Okay, so like I said, I've been getting information left and right about the Timo Meier and Jesper Bratt contract negotiation saga. I basically told you guys what Ryan Novozinski was saying, NHL.com, and also NHL Network. But let's talk about another reliable source, or two sources, in fact, and that is Jeff Merrick and Elliot Freeman. Obviously, they both host a podcast called 32 Thoughts, and they give a lot of information, a lot of background that's happening within the NHL. So according to Jeff Merrick, he said in regard to Meier in New Jersey, he said if they sign him, maybe does that mean the end of a player like Sharon Govich with the Devils? Elliot Freeman responded by saying, I was thinking more of Bratt. We don't have an answer yet on Bratt, right? And that was something that they were hoping they could get done too. Elliot Freeman continued and said, so the longer it goes quieter on Bratt, the more you're kind of wondering about that one. I think Meier will be a challenge. I think he's looking for a big number, which he should. The one thing New Jersey can do here, they can give him play next year for 1 year at $8.5 million. If they take him to arbitration, so ultimately they could do that, or they could trade him for fours. They don't really want to go much over Hughes' $8 million, but I don't think that's going to be possible here. I think you're going to have to go over that with Meier. Now, my thing is, like, am I willing to go over $8 million for Timo Meier? I'd say yes, because the fact of the matter is simply this. Like I said early on in the episode, the Devils were aiming for players like Matthew Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau last offseason, and I think the Devils were willing to give them their fair payday, and thus they would have been paid hypothetically more than Jack Hughes. So I'm okay with going slightly over for Jack Hughes' contract in regard to Timo Meier, because obviously Meier is a special player and he adds a new dynamic to this roster. But my thing is, I want more information on Bratt, and I know I basically got some information courtesy of Novo and what Bratt's agent is discussing. But I want to know, like, how much money is Bratt trying to demand here? Like, and is he willing to take a team-friendly deal? Because Pierre LeBrun says it could reportedly be 8 years, but we'll see what happens in that regard. But going back to what Jeff Merrick and Elliot Freeman were discussing, it does raise an important question. Who's going to be the odd man out when both players are re-signed? Because the name of the game for the Devils is that they got to retain a lot of other players aside from Timo Meier and Jesper Bratt. So when looking at these contract situations, obviously you got Nathan Bastian. He's set to become a restricted free agent. Jesper Boquist, same way. Michael McLeod, that is a player you need to retain 100%, because McLeod led the Devils in faceoffs, and he was a big piece as to why the Devils were able to have a successful playoff run. Yegor Sharangovich, restricted free agent, like Freeman and Merrick were discussing. Then for the defensive side of things, Kevin Ball, restricted free agent. Ryan Graves, unrestricted free agent. Damon Severson, unrestricted free agent. And something that we also need to talk about is some players who are not far off from entering free agency. So for Dawson Mercer, this is the final year of his entry-level contract. And then after that, he'll become a restricted free agent. You got to pay Mercer. Then Hughes, he's already used up 1 year of his entry-level contract. And Akira Schmid, this is the final year of his entry-level contract. So I'm sure Schmid would like to get paid too. And then you got to factor in Shimon Nemeth in like 3 years when his entry-level contract is up. So that's the thing, which is, and this is something that NHL Network was also talking about, which is like, how do the Devils spend their money conservatively so that way they can retain some of these players? At the end of the day, business decisions are going to have to be made in order to make that financial wiggle room work. And I'm actually going to talk about this in a future bonus episode with Neil Villapiano of Devil's State of Mind podcast, because I appeared on his show recently, and I'm going to post the episode that we recorded on my channel as well. But just to give you guys a bit of a preview, I'd say you got to move on from people like Miles Wood, who's going to be an unrestricted free agent. Then for Yegor Sharangovich, you could trade his rights away or get him off the books, because the thing about Sharangovich is that I like him and all, but the problem is like when Meier came, prior to when the Devils had to make some wiggle room work due to like injuries or some sort, Sharangovich was a healthy scratch because he was the odd man out. And then people were wondering like, why is Sharangovich a healthy scratch, but Miles Wood continues to play? And I was just like, yeah, Sharangovich is good at speed. He's a capable goal getter, and he is also very good on the penalty kill. But at the end of the day, Miles Wood does just a little bit more than Sharangovich. But obviously, when you're comparing the two, it's just more of a matter of who can provide more to the bottom six. And I talked about it in a previous episode. I believe Miles Wood can contribute just a little bit more than Sharangovich. But yeah, so the thing about Meier and Bratt is that, look, guys, the Devils have about $34 million in cap space to work with. And I believe that both Meier and Bratt are going to be in Devils uniforms come next year. But at the same time, they're going to have to sacrifice some other players. Now, some other players that might have to like just take a little bit less money are people like maybe Nathan Bastian and also Michael McLeod. I don't think they're going to be as sought after in like the market. I know they're both restricted free agents, but still, at the end of the day, it's like I'm sure they're going to be demanding for a bigger bump in their salaries. But the one thing that concerns me is that Mercer is going to have to get paid within the next year. Same with Akira Schmid. Then you got to factor in Luke Hughes, and also Shimon Nemeth when their entry-level contracts are up within the next 2 to 3 years, which is, I don't want the Devils to basically financially ruin themselves. And I think they have to make that very clear to Meier and Bratt, because they're trying to build for something special. They're not in a win-now circumstance. The Devils are in a perfect scenario right now because their players are young. They have not entered their primes yet. And also keep in mind that the Devils are very well capable of making a deep playoff push. They don't have to do it right here, right now, if that makes sense, which is if the Devils are older, if some of their main pieces were at towards the end of their contracts, then yeah, it's win now. Basically, pull out all the stops you possibly can, get all the guaranteed contracts, whatever the case might be. But the Devils, they can build for something special and take their time with it. They don't have to scramble for it. So that's my thing for Meier and Bratt, which is you got to take team-friendly deals. If I said it once, I said it 1,000 times. And I know you guys are tired of me talking about it and basically talking about the same thing. And quite honestly, I'm tired of talking about it myself. But like I said, information was coming out. Wanted to share my thoughts. So if there was an odd man out or odd men out, I would say Yegor Sharangovich, Miles Wood, Ryan Graves, Damon Severson, and maybe Jesper Boquist, but that could be negotiated. But like I said, you got to make room for other players who are set to become RFAs or UFAs in the not so distant future. So keep that in mind. So let me know what you guys think. What contract would you re-sign both Timo Meier and Jesper Bratt for? Is it time to move on from Timo? Is it time to move on from Jesper? And what would you guys do in this circumstance? Curious to your guys' thoughts. So watch on YouTube, leave a comment down below. If you are listening on a podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal Twitter page at TreyMatt4 or the show's Twitter page at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. So continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day in New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening once again.